Chapter 15 of Hiram Grange and the Chosen One. For heaven's sake, Hiram, come sit down. Fully dressed, Hiram stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, shoulders tensed. There were few people who could make him feel embarrassed. One was Mrs. Bothwell. The second was Punjabi, the old spiritualist cook at Delacour Academy who had raised him after Mother committed suicide. The third, of course, had been Father, who he'd neither seen nor heard from since the old man's disappearance, so it hardly mattered. Bothwell was his handler at the ambiguous Office of Investigative Research and Analysis. She sent him out into the field to locate and destroy the varied beings that snuck out through confluences, earthbound doorways from the abyss. And while her prim demeanor may be viewed by most as the affectations of a gentle woman, he knew the truth. Though she tolerated his quirks, even cleaned up such messes as the Jodie Foster incident, and provided for his specific needs, Bothwell's no-nonsense attitude when it came to work and his assignments was resolute. The hard glint in her eyes never seemed to falter, no matter the amount of blood spilled, whether that of an abyssal spawn or even Hiram's. Mrs. Bothwell sighed. Please, Hiram, sit. I'm not here to reprimand you. We're far too much to do. Hiram glanced over his shoulder. Mrs. Bothwell smiled and gestured to the chair across from her. Please. He nodded and flexed his shoulders, loosening stiff muscles. Feeling as if he were back in the headmaster's office at Delacour, Hiram walked to the chair across from Bothwell and sat down. Thankfully, the loathsome Klein had departed after leaving a black oblong suitcase and a canvas satchel, larger than his personal bag. Mab, of course, had vanished. Bothwell appeared to believe his story, but he hadn't missed Klein's amused, cryptic smile. Damn lackey anyway. Mrs. Bothwell removed her glasses from her nose and polished them with great care, using a handkerchief from her handbag. I have to admit, I'm not sure what to say. Only 5 hours here, and you identify the next target, then acquit yourself well with minimal data and without the proper tools. However, you almost destroy an entire bar and get yourself killed. Finished with her polishing, she replaced her glasses and favored him with a gaze of admiration mixed with consternation. I don't know whether to be proud or annoyed. Mrs. Bothwell, She held up a firm yet gentle hand. As I said, we haven't the time for our customary banter. This assignment requires an unusual amount of expediency. Expediency and your personal presence on site. I haven't seen you in the field since that unfortunate mess in Argentina. Indeed, but as I said, this case has developed disturbing new facets that require much closer supervision. Yes, this girl Therese, Mab's involvement, among other things. A short, business-like nod, so ill-fitting of her grandmotherly appearance. Yes, and 5 other dead girls. He nodded and was about to speak when a tickle in his throat interrupted him. He coughed and massaged his chest. Mrs. Bothwell frowned. Hiram, are you all right? Quite. Just a chest cold. Liar. Mrs. Bothwell pursed her lips. In any case, Mab's story seems consistent with our background checks. All the victims were orphans. Some grew up in institutions, others bounced between foster homes. She paused. All had connections to the arts. A musician, a sculptor, a dancer, a fortune-teller, even, at the last, Alan McTavie, a freshman at Ulster University's College of Art and Design. And then Therese. Interesting. Of course, fairy involvement complicates matters. Yes, it does, arrogant, smug bastards. Nevertheless, we've work to do. Someone wanted those girls dead, and someone the tannery for the job. That makes more sense now. Calling something like that to kill humans seemed like overkill. But fairy scions? Bothwell nodded. I agree. Our primary objective is still to find the talisman or conduit. I've gained you access to the underground maintenance tunnels and university corridor. You're to meet a man named Stemmons. He's the university vice provost. He's to conduct you to the history and archaeology department's artifact room to search for fraudulent artifacts. Get out from underneath him any way you can, but take care and be wary. He's a prickly, suspicious fellow. Bit of an ass, I'm afraid. Hiram licked his lips and smiled. He knew he shouldn't, but he couldn't resist. I detect an air of bitterness, Mrs. Bothwell. An old beau, perhaps? A sniff of disdain. Hardly my type. At all. The man lacks sexual stamina. Well, Hiram swallowed and tried not to make a face. That certainly gave me several images I'd rather not have. So onward to other things. Yes, what about Therese? Hopefully you'll encounter her again. For now, containment first as always. Hiram nodded. So you've got something that'll work against these things? Here, Bothwell grinned. Oh yes, something unique that should dispatch them nicely. She paused, then added, the device is experimental, which I know you despise, but the manufacturer's reputation is unparalleled. As always, I'll make do. He stood and walked to the dresser bureau and opened the case left by Klein. He couldn't help but whistle at the short-barreled shotgun inside. Smashing. Though he preferred his precious Webley, this new weapon should help. He lifted the gun out and caressed its sleek, destructive lines, while Bothwell recited its specifications. It's a one-of-a-kind, semi-automatic Franchi, based on the C15, top of the line. Because the ammunition has been designed specifically, a modified 6-round box magazine has been developed instead of the customary 8-round. Hiram frowned and peered down the gun's breech. Specifically designed ammunition was often a capricious bedfellow, prone to misfiring. Specially designed? How so? Are you familiar with Dragon's Breath? Ammunition developed in the 70s, outlawed because the cartridge used an exothermic, pyrophoric metal too unstable for practical use. Yes, a special brand of zirconium was used for these shell casings. More stable. Generates a sizable burst of elemental flame with each shot. Fabulous. What else? The slug itself is made of orchalium. Hiram almost smiled. Quite. The infamous space metal that transformed a tribe of aboriginal humans into the first Illuminati. According to legend, anyway. Mrs. Bothwell appeared at his elbow and nodded. Yes. Now, no one has ever actually seen orchalium in nature. Ours was synthetically made. However, it contains all the storied ingredients. And those are? According to our text, trace elements of copper, gold, silver, and iron. The iron isn't concentrated enough to dispatch fairies. She paused and smiled at him. When we detected the quantum fluctuations, however, I took the liberty of having several boxes of iron bullets made for the Webley. Hiram thought again of Mab and her smugness. Excellent. She tapped the satchel Klein had left. As usual, we've also provided you with magnesium flares. Necrotic tissue being allergic to them, of course. She offered him an apologetic glance. I'm sorry we didn't have them waiting last night. A little problem with slipping through customs because of something extra we provided. Oh? We've given you a small store of plastic explosives, C4 to be exact, along with infrared detonators. She raised an eyebrow. I only expect them to be used in the direst of circumstances. I'm still receiving bills for your last adventure, the C4. Oh, please. Those city officials were complete asses about that. I got the goblins, didn't I? Wiped out a whole nest, if I remember. Yes, but you also incinerated an entire elementary school. Hiram snorted. Hell's bells! It was holiday, the place was empty, and don't tell me those kids weren't absolutely thrilled to miss more school. He paused and then amended, even if they did lose a hamster or two. Indeed. In any case, please be more judicious this time. Hiram grabbed the magazine and slapped it home. With a vigorous thrust, he pumped the shotgun, loading around in the chamber with a satisfying chunk, and rested the barrel on his shoulder. He favored Bothwell with a manic grin. Of course. Judicious is my middle name. Part 3. Chapter 16. University Corridor, Underground Access Tunnels. Their mingled footsteps bounced off concrete walls, echoing back upon them throughout the subterranean space. This is a waste of my time. I have many, many more important things I could be doing. Vice Provost Stemmons was proving to be an asshole indeed. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Hiram squawked in a peevish voice, cultivated for his role, but the International Consortium of Universities takes grant fraud very seriously. He pursed his lips, tried to appear mousy, and did his best not to picture Bothwell with this man, or with any man, for that matter. This year alone, thousands in funds have been wasted on forgeries, which has prompted us to audit all the universities under our umbrella. Hiram played his cover story to a T, as he had years of practice in perfecting his role as an auditor for the non-existent agency. I have never even heard of this so-called consortium. I have a mind to call the Grant Funding Bureau for your credentials. You're welcome to. However, I still need your records. Luckily, Bothwell had several well-paid moles working at the Bureau. Any snoopers would find nothing but solid credentials. Stemmons grunted. What do you need again? I need to verify that all forms have proper signatures and that they match precisely the items in your collection. Stemmons gestured at the franchise case, which Hiram carried in his right hand. What's that? Large case for paperwork. This? Standard carbon dating tools. Carbon dating? Yes, to test suspect items for authenticity. The man stiffened. Really? Rest assured, should I find any forgeries, if your paperwork is in order, we'll exact justice for you, not against you. Stemmons flashed an unconvincing smile over his shoulder. How reassuring. We do our best. A tight nod. This way. Hiram swallowed and shoved down a cold, twisting nausea in his gut. The things inside him writhed as he fell in behind the vice provost. Therese shifted from one foot to the other, resettling the backpack on her shoulders for what seemed like the 100th time. Packing had been quick, really. She'd grabbed enough clothes for several days, along with all the cash and snacks she could scrounge, then dashed to the university quarters main bus terminal. Because she lived on the edge of campus, that had taken longer than she'd wanted. However, she made it there before the next scheduled wave of buses left, only to get stuck in a line that defied explanation. It allowed her to think about things more than she wanted. She shifted again, blew stray hair from her eyes. Ridiculous, really. The line hadn't moved since she'd gotten here. It was almost as if no one manned the terminal, and everyone in line only pretended to wait. A light touch caressed her thoughts. Whispering, talking, buzzing. A thin blonde girl, 2 persons ahead, shuffled around, arms hanging slack, mouth open as she stared. A young man in front of the blonde also turned and stared. An alarm jangled in Therese's head. On shaking legs, she backed away and looked around. Everyone in the bus terminal stared at her. She wanted to scream, but her breath caught in her throat when she heard a soft, fleshy ripping. As her gaze shivered around the room, stomach split open, exposing tentacles and gleaming eyes. Hello, Therese. Good to see you again. Therese gasped. The things parted to allow its approach. Her heart jackhammered. No. Her hand dug into her pocket for something sharp. The Reggie thing approached, its face scarred and twisted from the gunshot in the alley. Tentacles uncoiled from its torn belly. Nestling eyes glared at her. Hello, Therese. Give us a kiss, will you? In her pocket she found her keys. Slowly she pulled them free. It leaned in, reptilian tongue tasting the air. Unable to take any more, Therese screamed and jammed her keys into one of the Reggie thing's bloated eyes. Fluid spurted, The ruined eyeball melted, running down the stolen face. It laughed. Chapter 17. Hiram set down the franchise case and assessed the archival room. Statues, totems, even stone peace pipes lined the tables in rows. Masks and ancient diadems hung on the walls. Impressive. He walked down the middle aisle, shifted his satchel, and rummaged inside. Quite. What now? I hate to be redundant, but I've work to do. I don't want to keep you. Hiram withdrew the small, handheld electromagnetic scanner. I'm going to check these items against the digital manifest that lists suspected forgeries sold on the market within the past 10 years. You're going to check every item? We consider ourselves very thorough, Mr. Stemmons. What the hell am I supposed to do until you've finished? Hiram nodded towards the door. Please bring me your authorized purchase orders. It would speed up the process. Fine. Don't touch anything until I return. Wouldn't think of it. There was no answer, however, save that of a door opening and closing. Hiram turned his full attention to the scanner. He didn't like using technology. Like magic, it felt like a cheat. In this instance, however, he didn't have a choice. He activated the scanner. A yellow bar appeared on the device's small screen. He calibrated it for the room's perimeter. Anything used to conjure a confluence would be highly charged with residual electromagnetic energies. Of course, a talisman needn't be an object in this room. It could be any object that absorbed residual confluent energy from a supernaturally turbulent event. A slushy cup dropped by a student at the Columbine massacre, or even a rabbit's foot found at Chernobyl would work. Worst case, the conduit would be a person. He certainly eliminated plenty of those. This was the best place to start, however. Perhaps for once he stumbled across fortune and the conduit would be an object, and not another human life he'd have to snuff out so soon after Sadie. He shook his head. Containment first. Find the talisman, destroy the binding, banish the Tanaree. If the girl survived that long, he'd rescue her too. The universe and Mab be buggered. He coughed wetly, lungs aching. He massaged his chest. He realized the cold truth. By the time this ended, he would be dead. The least he could do was kill some more monsters, save an innocent girl, and put a notch in the win column before he took that last big ride. Chapter 18. The EM scanner emitted an increasingly high-pitched screech as the yellow bar shaded to red. He adjusted the settings as he passed the last table. It whined higher. The back wall, then. He waved the scanner over mounted artifacts. Moving outward in widening circles, the whine decreased in pitch. Reversing in direction, he slowly spiraled inward. The pitch rose as the yellow bar once again deepened to crimson. 3 sweeps later, the scanner produced a piercing whine over a tarnished bronze chalice, hung near shoulder height. The indicator burned bright red. Excellent! He deactivated the scanner and stowed it in his pocket. Let's end this, then. He reached for the chalice. The instant his fingertips brushed metal, pain seized his hand and flashed down his arm, vibrating his muscles to the bone. Howling, he grabbed his wrist and pulled. No good. The pain only increased. Numbness crept through his burning fingers. If he didn't do something soon, he'd lose his hand, perhaps even his arm. Eturu Palusu. Hiram's hand jerked free. He stumbled and almost fell. Arcs of pain shot all the way to his shoulder. Kali's tit! I hate magic! Not a very enlightened perspective, really. Hiram straightened and flexed his aching hand. Tendrils of smoke wafted from his blackened fingertips. He glared at Vice Provost Stemmons, who stood inside the doorway, hands in his pockets, smiling. I can empathize with your consternation, though. Nasty little ward, that. If I let the magic run its course, the nerves in your arm would have been fried. You'd do well to thank me. Hiram shook his stinging hand. Well, I was going to shoot your ass, but I suppose my thanks will have to do. You're not really from the consortium, are you? And you're not here about grant fraud. Hiram faced Stemmons and adjusted his jacket in a vain attempt to restore some dignity. Actually, that depends on what you conjured with that chalice. I don't suppose money will help this go away. What? People are dead. Damn it, man, I might die. Which is far worse. No, I don't suppose money will do. Hiram thought for a moment, then added, well, it'd take more than you have anyway. Stemmons frowned. Deaths? What deaths? Before Hiram could answer, Stemmons waved him off. No one has died. Some have possibly suffered moderate degradation along the way, but that's all. What the hell are you talking about? You recognize the chalice? Hiram glanced over his shoulder and studied it. Looks like a remnant of the Assyrian Empire, perhaps late Persia. Quite astute. Its previous owner was the Marquis de Sade. Oh. Hiram glanced at Stemmons, impressed in spite of himself. Yes, if you know about the Marquis's final days, you'll understand my affectation for this piece. Hiram thought quickly. Right, he immersed himself in the dark arts and... Bloody hell. You're using the damn thing to conjure a succubus, aren't you? Maybe even involving a few students as well? Stemmons smiled and edged rictus. Perhaps. However, I assured you no one has died. Yet. Son of a bitch. 2 confluences in the same place? Hiram scowled at the man. Why does this shit always happen to me? I have no idea what you're talking about. No matter. Smoothly, Stemmons drew a nickel-plated Walter PPK from his pocket, thumbed the safety off, and pointed it at Hiram. Hiram's spine froze as a ludicrous situation shifted to a deadly one. Hold on. If all you've done is conjured hell whores for some demonic shagging, I've got no quarrel with you. He calculated how quickly he could draw the Webley and didn't like the odds. There are much bigger things going on here. Honestly, I don't care. What? Why the hell not? Stebbins shrugged but kept the gun trained on Hiram. Because I've done things no one can know about. Blasted Catholics and Protestants are a bit persnickety about black magic and decadence, you see. Wouldn't put me in a very good light, would it? And, ironically, I did misuse a research grant to purchase that chalice. He shrugged. You see the job-related implications. I'll be sacked. Ruined. Honestly, man, I haven't the time. His insides quivered. Behind Stemmons, several shadows filled the doorway. A low buzzing assaulted his mind. An oily feeling of dread, loathing, and naked hunger brushed his spirit. Feed. Hiram's knees buckled. His head pounded and stomach churned. The creatures in the doorway had partly gestated. Slimy masses with pulsating eyes nestled in their distended abdomens. Maggot-riddled faces leered as they lurched forward. Stemmons, unaware, frowned. What the hell is wrong with you? No longer worried about Stemmons, Hiram backed up, digging into his satchel, while they pressed into his mind. Feed. The beast crept into the room. Thousands of voices screamed in Hiram's head. He'd suffered psychic attacks before, but this was different. It melded with him, and he couldn't tell where he ended and it began, and his mind burned under their gazes. Chapter 19. Therese shook as they surrounded her. Their oily skin leaked awful fluids, and they stared with empty eyes. Rivers of maggots squirmed from their slack-jawed mouths. Their bellies curdled as things pushed against thin skin. Others had great holes torn in them from which tentacles flailed. Something in the dripping hollows of their guts blinked hungry eyes. And Reggie, poor insecure Reggie, stood before her, maggot-ridden face oozing. Viscous fluids trickled from the eyes she'd stabbed. Patches in his hair exposed raw swaths of red meat. His belly had split open, revealing the thing inside. Serpentine tentacles coiled around his body and reached for her. The Reggie thing laughed as it plucked the keys from the ruined eye, tipped its head back, and swallowed them, Smacking pus-slick lips, it buzzed. Not nice, Therese. Not nice at all. The horrible voice clanged against hers, and a primal, liquid fear slithered in her thighs. This thing that wore Reggie's face was simply not right. She tried to speak, scream, but she wilted inside. Shh. It's all right, Therese. You'll understand everything when you're part of the hive. A bloated finger caressed her cheek, left behind a thin trail of slime that crawled on her skin and felt alive. You'll know everything because you'll be one with us forever. The thing coiled in its belly shifted, expelling rank odors, making her gag. She closed her eyes so she wouldn't have to see when they looked at her. No. Poor Therese. We'll make it easier. We'll allow Reggie back up for a bit. Silence. Something shifted. Then the being spoke in such an eerie imitation of Reggie, she was almost convinced that if she opened her eyes, he'd be there. Hey, love. Sorry for this. It paused. Therese sobbed and bit her lip. Something squelched and slid. She imagined the slit in his stomach widening as tentacles billowed out to envelop her. Something leathery coiled down her leg, wrapped around her thigh, knee, curled at her ankle. She gasped as something wet clasped her hands. I never treated you right, Therese. Never really deserved you. I see that now. Bits of her soul tore away. Therese shuddered, weak with exhaustion, fear, and hopelessness. The darkness behind her closed eyes spared her the horrible sight of this thing wrapping around her, but also tortured her because she wanted to believe that Reggie held her close, and not this monster. There. It's all right. No more tears. The hive has shown me wonderful things. In a moment you'll see. Then we could be together like we were meant to be. Something licked her face and swabbed the tears off her cheeks. A buzzing choir of thousands pierced her mind with one refrain. Eat you, eat you, eat you. Something inside her snapped. A wall tumbled down and released what had been growing there. Rage. She hated this thing that dared appear as the man she might have loved. She hated how it invaded her mind, pushed into her dark places. She hated them all. She wanted them to burn. Her body tingled. From a well deep inside, a white blazing river flowed. She mounted it, rode its waves. She opened her eyes. Everything glowed in shades of bluish white except them. They pulsed, black splotches of death and decay. They needed to be cleansed. Chapter 20. The artifact room shuddered, throwing Hiram and Stemmons to the floor. Across the room, the Tannery shrieked and collapsed. Hiram rolled onto his stomach, blazing with newfound resolve as the pressure against his mind faded. He still felt weakened from the things inside him, but for the moment his mind was free. Tentacles thumped against the ground and beat out a weird staccato rhythm as this creature wailed. Something had hurt them. Therese. He stood. The beast howled again. Stemmons rolled over and screamed like a teenage girl. Maybe even worse than the girls he ministered to in this room. Pathetic, really. From his satchel, Hiram plucked 2 magnesium flares. A Tannery flipped to its humanoid feet and howled in a language that burned against his brain. Its humanoid face morphed into a low-slung maw. Clusters of malevolent red eyes blinked in its twisting belly. Holy shit! Grange, what the hell is that? Hiram strode past the man. That, Stemmons, is what I meant by bigger things going on. With his teeth, he ripped the plastic end caps off the flares, and they burst into silvery white nimbi of fire. Hiram's lips and cheeks burned where glowing embers landed. The beast screamed again. And of course, past them was the Franchi. Did I do this? No. They're the reason I'm here, not your precious little demon sluts. They would have been much easier to deal with, however. More fun, too. The lead Tannery lumbered forward, screeching. To his disgust, the blue things inside twitched, yearning to be connected to their hive. Something oily brushed his mind. Hiram's teeth ground, his psychic fingers pried deep into his thoughts. Eat you, eat you, eat you. Hiram swept the flares low and focused on his goal, the Franchi. There are too many of the things for his Webley to be useful for long. He needed the wide fire of the shotgun's special slugs. On second thought, this also might be fun. Hiram readied himself for a charge. The Tannery roared. Stemmons screamed. Hiram bellowed. The beasts flung themselves forward. Blue fire, pulsing in waves from her, touching everything, purifying, burning away blackness. Burn it down. What is this? You are the one, Therese, the chosen one. All the Scions are dead save you, the last vessel. All will tremble. All will rejoice. All will serve. All will be cleansed. What's happening to me? Darkness must be destroyed. I don't understand, please. Burn it down, Therese. Burn the world. Rid it of darkness. Leave it pure and empty. No! The power faded, and the white river receded into its well. She still sensed it there, a silvery, glowing pinprick, trapped behind a wall once more. It had left a tendril behind, for now it lay inert. Therese came back to herself as sputtering droplets of water fell on her brow. They multiplied into a downpour. Therese shivered, soaked. She felt cold, but alive. She opened her eyes and gasped at the destruction before her. The room was scorched, piled ash sludging under the emergency sprinklers. The tables and chairs in the terminal waiting area were twisted, melted beyond recognition into the burnt metal and charred plastic. Everything sizzled and popped and hissed. Steam rose in swirling columns. Here and there, small fires flickered and died. The air shimmered with the lingering heat of her destruction. Her destruction. From her hands. She'd done this. Destroyed everything. A hollow pit opened in her stomach as she recalled the merciless voice in her head. Burn it down. She looked around again. The monsters had been destroyed, all of them except... Frowning, she peered through the watery streams. She felt a low buzz at the edge of her mind, and her guts clenched. Something flailed at the room's edge. Leathery tentacles slapped wet concrete. A high-pitched keening split the air, drowning out the distant fire alarms. And then, the buzzing filled her mind. There, pushing itself upright, was one of them, fully grown at last. Its hide glistened in the artificial rain, and tentacles slithered in the disintegrating mass of its destroyed husk. It screamed and lurched toward her. Therese felt the white river flicker inside. She closed her eyes and reached for it, found the tendril had left. She tugged, tried to pull down the wall and release the fire. She felt the glimmering of power tingling in her fingers, then nothing. She opened her eyes as the thing shrieked again. It had halved the distance between them. Shit! She turned and fled. The Tannery thrashed after her. She had one chance, and it loomed before her. An access door to the stairs had descended into subterranean corridors. Though reserved for custodians and faculty, students often used them during the winter. The doors were usually left unlocked. Therese refused to think this one might be locked. It would open. It had to. Her fingers closed on the handle. She jerked it open. Hope soared at the sight of the door below. If she could reach it, get through, and jam it shut somehow. Her right foot hit the first step and slipped. The world tilted as she pitched downward. The thing's rumble filled the stairwell, and even as she spun away into darkness, she recognized the bubbling sound for what it was. Laughter.